So example, Mrs. Putnam, she says at page 30 in my copy at least, the psalm, she cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. Mark it for a sign, mark it, right? Notice I've got up there in Act 1, this is a bit of plot for you, a bit of context. After Mrs. Putnam hears that the allegedly bewitched Betty was screaming when the word psalm was said. Do you see that? That's what was happening. So Mrs. Putnam in Act 1, they're in Reverend Parris's house. Mrs. Putnam is already buying into the hysteria, and now she thinks that just because Betty screamed when someone said the word psalm, that it must be a sign of her being bewitched. Can everyone get that? That's the context of that quote, right? So Mrs. Putnam is immediately showing a vulnerability to believing things that really don't have a lot of evidence behind it. It's a pretty stupid reason. Like, oh, she heard a girl scream when someone said a word psalm. It's like, therefore, the devil possesses you. Like that drastic conclusion, right? But that is the hysteria. That's the irrationality. Now, what's the technique that we see here? Couple you could focus on. So micro technique. I want a micro technique. Don't worry about macro. Remember, we're doing step 1 first. It is which part is repetitive? Yep, good. So, okay, here's a really important point for when you want to refer to repetition. If you want to refer to repetition more generally as being part of the style of the whole play, which it is, by the way, there is a repetitious style to all of the dialogue. Do you all remember that in the play? People are constantly repeating the same word. Because it's constant, it becomes a macro feature. So the first thing to note is when you want to talk about a type of repetition, you can actually add to the start of the sentence or as an extra part of the sentence that is characteristic. That repetitious style is characteristic of the play. The second thing is when you actually want to zoom in on the repetition you're talking about there, Letitia, you don't want to just say the word repetition. So we can say repetition for saying the whole thing uses a lot of repetition, but for your particular example, you want to say the type of repetition. So do you know the types of repetition there? The psalm, what's that? Epizeuxis is actually the type of repetition. It's going to sound better if you say the specific type, all right? That one sounds a little bit ridiculous. The others aren't so bad. Epizeuxis, Epizeuxis. Epizeuxis is where you immediately repeat the same word or phrase directly after each other. The psalm. But you could also say somewhere, maybe after it, which is an example of the broader use of repetition throughout the play. You can say repetition there,